What's up, guys? Nick G here. I'm going to try to keep this little intro of me talking brief because the clips I have strung together already stretch on for probably like 20 minutes or something like that. But it's a series of clips I've put together. Hopefully they make sense together and you guys can kind of connect the dots. I'm not going to go over each individual clip and talk over them and try and give you my point of view or my interpretation. I'll let them sort of speak for themselves and leave it up to how you think and feel about them. And I think that's important to do, to leave that up to the audience and things like that. I don't want to tell people how to think and what to derive from it, although we'll probably arrive at remarkably similar conclusions, and I think that's telling in and of itself. But yeah, this whole video is about exactly how it sounds, blocking the transcendent. And by that I mean the destruction of the imagination to a degree. There's multiple ways of looking at this. Having no imagination or no belief in oneself or in the possibility that you could be something or someone different than the way you already are, or a situation that you're in could be different than what it already is. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is someone being godless or goalless, or nothing to aim at, no principle, nothing to stand on, nothing to aim at, nothing to guide one's behavior. And there is some subjectivity about that. Like, a large portion of it is someone coming up with that goal and their ideal situation of themselves, an ideal situation for their friends and family and all of you to be in. You know, it's important that you create that on your own, but even through everyone's subjective, independent creation of this ideal, again, it usually arrives at like similar places, very similar problems that people run into, and very similar ultimates that people think of. And that's another way to think of it, is what is your ultimate? What is your absolute ideal form or condition, somewhere that you want to be, somewhere that is better? And again, I've gone into detail about this excessively in other videos, but the purpose of having a God or a goal or something transcendent, something above you, something that you answer to, is because suddenly with that in place, nothing's relative anymore. What you think, feel, and act actually does matter. I mean, it does matter, in my opinion, whether you realize this or not, but when you do realize this and conceptualize this for yourself, it becomes more and more obvious. But yeah, things don't become relative anymore. You have a thing to compare your actions and feelings to. You have a contrast point. So if it's a lot harder to be blind and willfully blind to your mistakes and to your errors when you have a sharp understanding of what you want and where you're going and how you need to get there. So, and that's all the transcendent is. Again, we can quibble about the truth and like one ultimate objective truth for all of us, you know. We can debate about that and get closer and closer to that, whatever it is. But even with this being a lot of elements of it being subjective and to your own independent individual feelings and aspirations, it's still absolutely important for you to do. And I still need to do this. And I mean, it's stressful because, again, now you have something to answer to. You don't get to make up the rules of what is right and wrong. You're not God. You don't get to do whatever you want. You don't get to just behave however you want. There is a difference between right or wrong. And how do you know that? Because the transcendent isn't blocked. Because you can see it. You can see the clear path. And when you do things and say things that knock you off that path or slow you down off that path or have you look in other directions off that path, again, you'll be able to realize that you're doing that more and more clearly than ever before. The more that you the more that you conceptualize this ideal, this ultimate, this heaven, the more that you do that, the better off you'll be. Although the more responsibility it'll place on you, the more restraint it'll place on you. Because it is restraints. Because, again, if you want to get to the ultimate, there's requirements to get to the ultimate. There's requirements to get to heaven, right? You don't just get to do whatever you want and still, at the end of the day, wake up and arrive and, hey, I'm here and it's all good, right? Like, no, you gotta, there's requirements. You have to, again, I've given many examples in past videos. If you want to be professional athlete, that's the ultimate, right? Let's say, I mean, that's not bad. It's a good place to start. You can move beyond that, definitely, but let's just say that's what it is. And now you immediately have restraints placed on you. You immediately have limitations placed on you. Just from that. Just from saying, I want to do this. Okay, well, if you want to do that, that means you can't do this, this, and that. If you want to be an athlete, you can't eat bad. You got to get up and exercise. You got to, practice every day. Things like that. You automatically have restraints and rules now. You don't get to make up the rules. You get what I'm saying? The ultimate gets to make up the rules. God gets to make up the rules, if that makes sense. And I know the word God puts a lot of people off. That's why I don't really care, because I'm not afraid to use that word. And I think it elevates it. The reason I use that word, too, is not just because, a lot of people say, okay, well, then why do you need the word God? Why do I need it? Because I think it elevates what I'm talking about to the level of value and importance, to a recognizable level of value and importance that needs to be recognized. So that's why I use the word God, because that's what it is. That's how it functions, primarily. Like, it's not. It really does make a lot of sense, man. If and there's a lot of BS about religion. I get it, and there's a lot of people who are under control from it. And this isn't even about religion. This is just about something above you. This is just about something that you answer to, and it'll actually make you stronger. That sounds crazy to anyone who's like completely ego-based. Like, how could me placing restraints on myself and answering to something else other than me be good for me? How could that make me stronger? Well, it definitely does. And if you don't have that superordinate principle, or that transcendent, or that goal, or that God, or that whatever that is, or the truth, or the principles that you want to uphold, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, you'll start looking to other things instead of this almighty thing that you conceptualized that's of real importance and true value to you. You'll start looking to, like, oh, now the crowd, the collective tells me how I need to think, feel, and act. The television, the politicians, the Hollywood, right? This is the importance. Otherwise, if you're gonna be a slave to something, and I hate to use the word slave, but if you're gonna answer to anything, make sure you do this work and you think it out thoroughly, and you come up with that thing that you're answering to thoroughly, so you don't just fall victim to the nonsense of the collective that's completely lost, or fall to the social engineering, or the cultural narratives, or the societal programming that's. I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist, I'm sorry, so I believe it's being deliberately put out there to keep people in docile, slave-like behavior, drug addict, dependent-ass behavior, because why would you want people, if you're in power, why would you want to nourish the spirit of freedom and the spirit of liberation and the spirit of strength and possibility into the people beneath you? You wouldn't. You'd want to absolutely suppress that by any means necessary, because you're trying to maintain your power. It makes total sense. I don't know why people think that's crazy. That's all conspiracy theories are. It makes 100% sense. And yeah, anyways, that's it. I've already talked longer than I expected to, so thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoy the clips, and I hope you can get something out of it.
And the moment you think you know it all, you have lost yourself again. It's one of the major things that I've discovered in my life, is by the time we reach an age where we understand we need to learn something that we don't really know at all, it's usually in the late 30s or sometime in the 40s. If you've discovered that earlier than that, you are the exception, you are not the norm. Because isn't it true that during the first years of our life, we're just discovering the world around us? The supremacy of the mind of man, not in God. Anytime man has supremacy over everything, everything becomes what? Subjective. If you're God, how can you do something wrong? And that's the whole problem with this crowd now. They don't have anybody to answer to. You see, whether you believe in God or not, the human race must have God. They must have a superior power to which they must answer. If they do not, then everything becomes subjective, and if I want to slice your head in half, by God, there's nothing wrong with me doing it because I'm God. You understand that? That's really what's wrong. When man has nothing or no one to answer to, man can do no wrong, can he?
Because so much of what we call human personality is actually playing through the biological computer system.
This has creeped in. What are you talking about? An exact replica of this has creeped into politics and into
Exactly.
in their last few decades, and it's what is called, it's the Tina principle. There is no alternative. We must have austerity. There is no alternative.
Exactly.
We must have nuclear power. There is no alternative. This is the only way to do it. There's no other way to do it, so we have to do it this way. This has become an overriding trend, and people have taken this on board.
Yes, they have.
I think.
Manipulation of consensus, as they once called it.
It's a dangerous thing to take on board
It's a
because
program.
it blocks off
Yes.
all possibility.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And
Cain has reacted to his self-consciousness by withdrawing from the infinite, and there's a tremendous danger in that, because it starts to mean that he relies purely on his own devious devices to sail his ship through the shoals of life. He believes, as his arrogance develops, as a consequence of his withdrawal from the infinite, a contact that he can't tolerate because he can't tolerate his own vulnerability, that he's able to deceive the structure of reality itself, to offer second-rate sacrifices to God himself, who can see absolutely everything, because the infinite is absolutely everything, and to prevail nonetheless. Well, needless to say, this does not work. And it doesn't work in an obvious way. If you talk to people and they reveal to you their unnecessary suffering, it's very straightforward to look behind what it is that they have to say. They'll tell you the poor decisions they made in their lives, and the opportunities that they didn't take, and the chances that they didn't have enough courage to grasp, and the sacrifices they failed to make. There's nothing mysterious about it. And their own experiences teach them full well that they pathologize the relationship they have with the nature of reality. Well, that's a terrible thing. Well, and Cain is dreadfully unhappy. He's unhappy because nothing he ever wants happens, and that's partly because he doesn't really want it, because if he really wanted it, he'd make the right sacrifices. The salt is rubbed into his wounds by the existence of his brother, for whom everything seems simple, but of course really isn't. Cain goes to complain to God. And I had to read 3 or 4 different translations of these particular verses to figure out what this meant. And he says, what in the world is going on here? I'm working myself to the bone. I'm sacrificing things left, right, and center. Everything I touch turns to dirt. Everything turns against me. Like, what's up with the nature of reality? Cain's essential vulnerability is revealed and exacerbated by his pathological attitude towards his own actions. God says to him, essentially, sin is a predatory cat that crouches at your doorway and leaps on you at will. But if you only wanted to, you could master it. And that is absolutely the last thing that Cain wants to hear. Because if things are going from bad to worse for you, and you're playing a causal role in it, There's nothing more horrible than that someone can do to you, but reveal to you in a way that you can't deny that you're entirely complicit in your own demise. And that's exactly what God does to Cain. And so what does Cain do? Well, the logical thing would be listen, because if the structure of reality itself tells you something, it's best to listen, since there's no way out of it. But that's not what Cain does. He's so incensed by his sensual vulnerability, compromised and exacerbated by his failure to make the appropriate sacrifices and to conduct himself appropriately, that he decides then and there, number one, to destroy his ideal, to reduce the tension that he feels when that ideal exists as a contrast point, and number two, to destroy the favored son of God. And so he goes out into the field and kills Abel. Paradise Lost just before the rise of the nation states, and Milton also had the intuition that there was something wrong with rationality, and he identified rationality with the mythology of Satan. And in the mythology of Satan, Satan was represented as the highest angel in God's heavenly kingdom. So you can think about that as the highest psychological function, who had rebelled against God and was then cast into hell. And the idea, there's an idea that's being expressed by Milton. He was one of the foremost poetic geniuses of the English language, Milton and Shakespeare. And what Milton was trying to understand was, what is the nature of evil? And his representation gathered up the dreamlike theories of evil that had been collected around all of Western civilization for thousands of years. And his hypothesis was this: evil is the force that believes that its knowledge is complete and that it can do without the transcendent. And as soon as it makes that claim, it instantly exists in a place that's indistinguishable from hell. And it could get out merely by admitting its error, and it will never do that. It's not like there's no way that people can improve themselves.
Right.
Quite the contrary. People can improve themselves, I think, to a degree that we don't understand. You know, because a human being, for better or worse, is something potential as well as something actual.
Right.
And that's really weird, that idea of potential, because it's not actually measurable or tangible, but we seriously believe it's something like the idea of spirit. You know, but
Potential.
yeah, but people believe in it, you see.
Yeah.
Because I might say, well, you're not living up to your potential. And you might disagree, but you would definitely understand the statement.
Right.
And you think, well, what is this potential? It's like, it's not actual. It's not real.
But it is, isn't it? Though, if you see someone, especially artistic, like you see someone who may be self-sabotaged with drugs or alcohol or personal chaos, but they can create amazing music, but they never get it out. You see that oftentimes with artists. And oftentimes you see that after initial success. You'll see some amazing motivation early in their career, then initial success, and then self-sabotage after the fact, not realizing their potential. Obviously, they've hit some sort of a frequency where they resonate with people that appreciate them. Authors, you see that with musicians, comedians, all sorts of people that create things. And then they're not living up to their potential because they've allowed the demons to take over the inner workings of their mind. You know, so... Right.
That's right. So, but the point is they had a warning, and the warning was that the rational mind liked to fall in love with its own creations. Right.
So the term intellectual, the problem is that it identifies one aspect, and it sort of defines one aspect of behavior and thinking, only one.
Yeah, it's the intellect.
It's not a
well, what
balance.
happens is it's like the intellect is raised to the status of highest God. That's the right way to think. See, the God idea. Here's another way of thinking about it that's quite cool. I learned this from Jung, and you can take it for what it's worth. The highest ideal that a person holds, consciously or unconsciously, that's their God. It functions in precisely that manner. And people might say, well, I don't believe in God. It's like, well, it depends on what you mean.
Right.
And I'm not being foolish about that. It's like, we're very complicated creatures, and we're run by all sorts of very strange things down there in the unconscious, you know. And the Greeks thought we were the playthings of the gods because we serve lust, we serve thirst, we serve hunger, we serve rage, you know, and those things all transcend us. So that's why they were gods. You know, rage, that's the war god. Well, why is it a god? Well, it exists forever. It exists in all people. It takes them over and directs their behavior. It's a god. Well, you can quibble about the details. No, it's not a god. Okay, fine. It's a psychological force.
Right. Do people get too hung up on that one word?
Well, they don't really. We have to think about it functionally to some degree. We have to think about what that idea means. We've had that idea forever. It isn't just some superstition. Jesus, we've got to be more sophisticated than that, man.
Right.
You know, and that's partly, well, this is partly what I think is unfortunate about the new atheists, let's say, is they don't take the damn problem seriously.
Of light. Now, this could mean two different things. We have to understand that Lucifer and the Aten are the same basic principle, the same symbolic principle, and they are essentially, they are a dual god. There is a light aspect of the sun god, the one that brings true light of awareness, and then there is the dark aspect of light. So one can be truly illuminated and really possess the light, really possess the knowledge, and then there is one who can be born into the dark light. Those who have knowledge of how things really work, but the way they're using it is for the ego. Being my will be done because I view myself as God and separate from everyone else, and I am out there to manipulate and rule them. So either way you look at that symbol there, it is the Aten or Lucifer. It doesn't matter whether you're looking at that symbolically as positive or negative, and I will go over both interpretations, both the positive and negative. However, it can in both aspects, this entity could be seen as Aten or Lucifer. Keep that in mind. And this is the symbol of all masonry. It is the symbol of all builders. And who are the builders? We all are the builders. We are all collectively on this planet the co-creators of our collective experience. Whether we are doing that creation unconsciously or consciously creating our experience, we are the builders of this world. And this is what we've built it into, what we currently have right now. So, who are the builders? We are the builders. But there's two different types of masons. See, there are masons that build with stone. They build the pyramid upward. They're building with stone. If you connect these 5 symbols as they are connotatively used in this seal, they form an inverted, skewed pentagram. And an inverted, skewed pentagram, if you look into dark occultic symbology, is always used as a symbol of pacts. It's a symbol of pacts, of promises made, to be something to be fulfilled, to be delivered upon completion of something else. So again, we saw that these 4 arms represent the material world, depicted as the upward pointing pyramid, the brick, the physical object, and they are crushing the spirit, the 5th element, into the ground, burying it under the weight of the pyramid. See, the dark builders, the dark masons, those who are building toward a world of male domination, the blade. See, they're building with bricks. The bricks are people who are trapped in physical 5-sense reality and left brain prisonhood. They are those who can not change. They have one form, and it's hard. Building the blade, if you complete this structure in brick, they have all the light, and the entire world is bathed in darkness. That in that symbol, the Aten or Lucifer represents the sorcerer, and he is completely trapped in ego. The ego-bound consciousness. It's the I in the triangle. I am God, the sorcerer says to the world. And I will make everyone in this world and the entire world in my own image and likeness. But I will have all the light, and the light will be blocked out to those in ignorance and in one form. And the male-dominator world will be born into existence, and it will bathe the world forever in darkness. That's the negative connotation of this symbol.
I just want you guys to remember, you know, that right now there's this thing where ethics aren't what they used to be. This idea that people are trying to replace the ideas of good and bad with better or worse, and that is incorrect. You gotta keep your ethics intact, because good and bad is a compass that helps you find the way. And a person that only does what's better or worse is the easiest type of person to control. They are a mouse in a maze that just finds the cheese. But the one who knows about good and bad will realize that he's in a maze. So, that being said, I just hope that all of you guys transcend whatever you see as your obstacles, and that you live outstanding lives.
He showed you exactly a map. He gave you a map. People ask me, Akhi, what do I need deen for? Have you ever heard this? What do I need deen? You know why you need deen? Because deen is your GPS through life. Deen is your GPS through life. If you don't have deen, Habibi, you're a lost soul. You're chasing your whims and your desires. Deen is a GPS. I'm lost, Habibi, I'm lost. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. Deen, GPS. Turn around, final destination where? Jannah, fine. Your location, final destination, that's the road. Follow. Follow. But nahna no. The road is clear. It's there. I can see it. And everyone thinks he's a doctor and a scholar. Habibi, no, trust me. Go left here, I'll show you a shortcut. Turn right here, trust me, I've been here before. And then when he turns right, is this it? Wallah, I don't know, man. I don't know, wallahi, you know, there used to be a tree. I think they cut the tree down. Left and right and U-turn. Habibi, what do you waste your time for? The path is there, the path is...
Western man came and said, there is no God, they're just making it up. Right! But God is the greatest human invention in human history. And the reason being, the reason Africans created God is so that humanity in its infinity would never run out of something to rise to. This is why God exists. If you don't have God, you don't rise.
First of all, you know, the music industry is just a microcosm of the world. So whenever you stand for something and you stand for goodness and truth, you will always get resistance. That's period. Whether you're in the pharmaceutical industry, the record industry, or whatever. Whenever you stand for truth and for the service, you know, the service of others. See, I could make money very easily. I could make records that are self-indulgent and, you know, basically self-promote me. I could do that. I could do that. Promote myself. That was redundant, but you know what I mean. You know, just do those things. It's very easy. As a matter of fact, you know, lyrically as an MC, that stuff comes easy. But in order to promote something higher, I mean, I feel now, at the ripe old age of 25, that the only thing that I could do is serve others. You understand what I'm saying? And because there are people who have not reached that point in their walk, you know, yes, there's a little anger, there's a little resentment, because you raise a standard, you know. So I've been put in this unique position. I have this very unique responsibility that God has made me aware while I still have the mic, you know. And it's like I was expressing to my good friend today, I said, my mother, you know, she taught me, she raised me with certain morals and certain standards, but you know, like any kid, when I was out there with my friends, you know, I cut up, I wilded out, acted up amongst people whose mothers may not have taught them the same ideals. But every time I acted up, it was like my mother was always right there, She was always there like, Lauren, I see you and you know better. You know, and I got in trouble. And that is how my Father in heaven responds to me. Listen, I told you don't do that. I told you don't do that. And I told you that you better have the courage, because the kids, they may talk about you. They might say bad things about you, but you know, when you come home, what I have waiting for you, if you do what I tell you to, and also what I have waiting for you if you don't.
Psychologists have known for decades, for most of the century, that if you cloak yourself in anonymity, your penchant for being nastier and meaner grows. And it's an odd, I would say it's a fault of human nature, actually. We should recognize that and do what we can to overcome it, to rise above it. You can say, well, it's human nature. Well, civilization is what we've created for ourselves by overcoming what might otherwise have been human nature.
That I'm nominally caring for.
Well, that requires, you might say, well, that requires careful meditation and prayer. You know, if you wanted to be traditional about it, I would say you have to orient, you have to determine, this is a process of soul searching. What are you oriented towards? And the answer could easily be nothing. Well, this is why I produced the Future Authoring Program. You got to be oriented towards something, because otherwise you're disoriented. You just spin around in circles and then you suffer. And so do people around you. It's not a good solution. Orient yourself towards something. You have to figure out what it is. What will work for you? What goal would justify the suffering of your life? Start trying to piece that together. You're going to get better at it. But it's a personal process. And you should use your education to inform that. So you need a personal place to stand, because otherwise you're going to be handed a place to stand on a plate. And it may be one that makes you a puppet of someone else's goals. So stop saying things that violate your conscience, instead of stop saying things you know to be untrue, because we run into the truth problem. But I would say stop. Here's another idea. Stop saying and doing things that make you feel weak. Just all you have to do is pay attention to that. Some things you do will make you feel disintegrated. It's a physiological sensation. Disintegrated and weak. It's something that Carl Rogers commented on. He thought about that as part of, now I can't remember the word. It's something like integrity, but that isn't the word he used. But some things improve your integrity and some things disintegrate you. Now, the things that disintegrate you, you often do to impress other people, or because you're taking a shortcut, or you're escaping what you know to be your moral obligation. And your moral obligation stems naturally from your aims. Like once you have aims, you have moral obligations. They come together, because the moral obligation is what you need to do in order to obtain the aim. So, and if you don't have an aim, well, then you're aimless. So that's not a solution. So along with the aims come the moral obligations. Then when you violate the moral obligations, you'll have a sense of that violation. It's like, well, you have to stop doing that. Or that's something you could do. You don't have to. You don't have to do any of this. But I would say that's where people should start. You start small. It's not small. You think it's small. It's not small.